Close your eyes for a moment. Let everything you call life fade into the background. The noise, the names, the roles you play. Notice how the world still seems to move even when you stop participating. The stories continue, but something in you begins to step back, watching. The tension of trying to win eases, and a quiet question rises. Was any of it ever real? You start to sense the edges of a dream you've been living inside. The victories, the losses, the endless chase, all threads in a pattern woven by the mind, believed by the observer. And as the awareness sharpens, the game itself begins to unravel. The moment the mind awakens to its own architecture, something extraordinary becomes visible. The board of life isn't found out there beneath your feet or in the structure of the world. It's projected from within, an invisible design that arranges perception into patterns, categories, and boundaries. Every rule you ever followed was written by that same mechanism of interpretation. The mind lays out the grid, defines the players, and sets the limits of what seems possible. It names one thing success and another failure, then spends a lifetime running between them. It begins innocently. The mind wants stability. It wants to know where the ground is. It builds systems to make sense of the unpredictable. But the cost of that sense-making is confinement. Once the board is drawn, the mind forgets it drew it. It believes the lines are real. The more it plays, the more it becomes invested in its own invention, defending the boundaries as if they were sacred. Consider how effortlessly you obey invisible rules. You wake at a certain time because that's what the clock demands. You pursue recognition because that's what the culture rewards. You avoid silence because it doesn't fit the rhythm of productivity. Yet none of those rules existed before the mind agreed to them. The game is sustained by collective belief, by millions of minds synchronized in the same illusion, convincing one another that this is how reality works. But if you look closer, something curious happens. The rules begin to contradict themselves. You're told to be authentic, yet also to fit in, to relax, but to stay ahead, to love without attachment, yet fear being alone. These paradoxes are not flaws in the system. They are signs that the system itself is imaginary. The mind keeps revising its rulebook to maintain control, but control is only possible where illusion persists. Notice how the mind reacts when you question the game. It tightens. It rushes to explain, to categorize, to restore order. It tells you that skepticism is dangerous, that doubt will leave you lost. But that fear is the voice of the board defending itself. It doesn't want to dissolve because without rules there is no game, and without the game the mind doesn't know who it is. You can observe this defense mechanism in real time. Think of a moment when you felt judged, at work, online, in a relationship. The body tenses, thoughts accelerate, the sense of me becomes sharper. What's really happening is that the mind is reinforcing its position on the board. It says, they shouldn't have said that. I deserve better. I'm right. They're wrong. Each thought redraws the boundaries. Each emotion strengthens the illusion that there are sides to defend. But what if that me is just another piece on the board? What if the player itself is part of the design? The moment you start to see that, a quiet fracture appears in the structure of the mind. It's not a violent break. It's more like light seeping through a wall that was never solid. The awareness begins to separate from the thought that built it. The observer starts to glimpse its independence from the pattern. It's tempting to turn even this realization into another rule, to think, I should detach more, I must stay present, I need to stop thinking. But that's still the mind playing its own game. It invents spiritual rules just as easily as material ones. It builds a subtler board, made of meditation, insight, and ideals, and then convinces you that liberation is another trophy to earn. The form changes, but the mechanism remains. The mind's true addiction isn't pleasure or success, it's continuity. It will accept suffering if suffering means the game keeps going. It would rather play endlessly than face the stillness that reveals its unreality. That's why silence feels threatening. In silence, the board flickers. In deep awareness, the lines blur. The mind can't locate itself there. It calls that void boredom, emptiness, or even death. Yet it's in that space that the observer begins to remember what it actually is. Look at your own experience right now. Thoughts arise and vanish. Emotions swell and fade. You might notice sensations in the body, sounds in the room, fragments of memory passing by. Each is a move on the board, but behind all of them there's something untouched, a still awareness that doesn't come or go. That awareness doesn't follow the rules because it doesn't belong to the game. It's the ground upon which the board appears. Once you start to notice this, the logic of the mind begins to reverse. What used to feel like cause and effect starts to look like reflection and projection. You realize that life doesn't happen to you, it happens through you. The board reshapes itself according to the patterns you hold, the interpretations you feed it. Every belief becomes a line on the grid. Every certainty becomes a square that limits movement. The freedom you've been searching for isn't outside the board. It's in remembering that you drew it. The mind isn't the enemy. It's a brilliant architect that forgot it was dreaming. To see this clearly is to reclaim authorship of your own perception. You stop trying to win and start observing how the game sustains itself. The rules lose their grip not because you broke them, but because you saw that they never existed beyond belief. And in that seeing, a strange peace begins to form. Not the peace of victory, but of recognition. You realize that everything you've ever experienced, every moment of joy or despair, every triumph or collapse, was part of the same creative movement. The mind wrote the script, acted the roles, and forgot it was both playwright and audience. When you truly grasp this, the tension to control life fades, and what remains is an open awareness, spacious, unbound, quietly watching the board it once believed was real. At first, there was only awareness, open, vast, without direction or need. Then, somewhere within that stillness, the faintest spark of curiosity appeared. A question without words. What would it be like to be something? And from that subtle question, the entire theater began to unfold. The observer became fascinated by its own reflection, by the possibility of separation. It watched itself move, feel, desire, and in that watching, it forgot that it was the one watching. This forgetting is what gives rise to the sense of me. It's not an error, it's an act of creation. The observer needed to believe in the reality of the game to experience it fully, so it built identities like costumes. The child, the student, the lover, the professional, the parent, the seeker. Each role came with its own rules, its own language, its own pain. The observer began to identify so completely with these masks that the silence behind them faded into the background. When the observer believes the game is real, life feels heavy with consequence. Every move matters. Every choice becomes a measurement of worth. The joy of being transforms into the anxiety of becoming. Success and failure start to dictate identity. The observer begins to defend its position on the board, convinced that losing a piece means losing itself. But how could awareness, which holds the entire game, ever truly lose anything? You can feel this belief every time you say, "I am this," or "I am not that." Each statement is a boundary drawn across infinite space. The observer begins to mistake those lines for reality. It forgets that they're made of thought. It becomes emotionally invested in maintaining them. The more it defends them, the smaller its world becomes. What was once an open field of possibility turns into a maze of definitions. And yet, even in the deepest identification, awareness never disappears. It waits quietly beneath the noise, patient and unchanging. You can sense it in moments of pause, when you're staring at the horizon, or hearing your name but feeling strangely detached from it. There's a fleeting recognition. I'm not the story. I'm the one seeing it. But almost immediately the mind rushes back in, wrapping that insight into new words, new rules, another layer of belief. The observer clings again to the game, unwilling to let go of the thrill of participation. The strange paradox is that the observer suffers precisely because of the beauty of its own dream. The emotions, the relationships, the striving, they all feel so vivid, so intimate, that letting go seems impossible. The thought of awakening feels like betrayal, as if truth would erase the warmth of being human. But awakening doesn't take away the color of life. It simply reveals that the color was never outside you. The entire spectrum was projected by the light of awareness itself. Think about how easily we confuse perception with identity. You look in a mirror and think, "That's me." You read a message and feel a surge of pride or pain. But those are only movements on the screen of consciousness. The observer has become so immersed in its own reflection that it doesn't notice it's watching itself. Like a dreamer running through their own dream, every direction feels external, yet every road leads back to the mind that created it. This is why no one can truly escape the game by force. Every attempt to control, fix, or purify the illusion still belongs to the illusion. The observer must see the futility of struggle before surrender becomes possible. That realization doesn't arrive through effort. It comes through exhaustion, the kind that happens when the player finally stops running and realizes the finish line was never real. It's in that moment of quiet defeat that something remarkable happens. The observer begins to feel the faint pull of remembrance. A subtle knowing whispers, "You've been watching all along." The edges of identity start to soften. The roles lose their solidity. You may still act, speak, laugh, and work, but the intensity of ownership fades. Life continues, yet it feels lighter, as if gravity itself has less power. But make no mistake, the mind doesn't surrender easily. It will try to claim even awakening as its own victory. It will say, "I understand now, I'm awakened." It will turn enlightenment into another achievement, another story to protect. And so the cycle continues until you notice the subtle trick. The observer believing in its own awakening is still part of the game. True awakening doesn't belong to anyone. It's not an event that happens to the observer. It's the recognition that the observer was never separate in the first place. It's not about changing what you see. It's about seeing who is doing the seeing. When this recognition deepens, identification begins to dissolve like mist under sunlight. The personality remains, but it no longer commands the stage. Emotions rise and fall without resistance. Experience unfolds naturally, without the weight of me trying to manage it. You may still feel pain, but it's not personal anymore. You may still feel joy, but it doesn't demand possession. You start to move through life with a kind of quiet clarity, engaged yet unattached, aware yet spontaneous. The game continues to play, but the player is transparent now. The same awareness that once believed it was trapped inside the board now sees that it was the entire field all along. And that realization that you were never truly lost changes everything. You see that even the forgetting had purpose. The illusion wasn't a mistake, but a movement of consciousness exploring itself, tasting limitation, so it could remember its own boundlessness. Every heartbreak, every triumph, every restless question was part of that return. The observer's journey through the maze was never about finding the exit. It was about realizing that the walls were made of thought and that freedom was never outside the dream. It was the dreamer waking up inside it. There comes a point when the story begins to loosen its hold. Not because you've conquered it, but because you finally stopped trying to edit it. The events still unfold. People come and go, thoughts rise and fade, emotions pass like weather across the sky, but the sense of being the main character starts to soften. You notice that what you thought was you is actually a current within something far greater. The storyline, once so solid and urgent, starts to feel almost translucent. You can see through it now. The same scenes that once triggered deep reaction begin to move differently. Instead of being pulled into their gravity, you watch them drift by like leaves carried downstream. There's no resistance, only observation, a simple awareness of what arises and what dissolves. At first, this can feel unsettling. The mind, used to control, doesn't know how to function without an agenda. It wants to measure progress, to prove that something is happening. But consciousness doesn't move in straight lines. It unfolds like a tide, sometimes advancing, sometimes receding, yet never leaving the ocean. What you are beginning to sense is that the you who was trying to awaken was just another wave in that ocean. The awareness that sees even that, that's what's real. The more you rest in this awareness, the clearer it becomes that everything appearing within it, the sensations, the thoughts, the roles, the dramas, is simply movement. Consciousness doesn't judge or prefer one movement over another. It allows all of it. Pain and pleasure, clarity and confusion, victory and loss, they're all equally expressions of the same field. This isn't indifference, it's freedom. It's the end of resistance to what is. When the storyline dissolves, what remains is presence. a quiet, unshakable stillness that doesn't need to be achieved because it was never absent. It's not the kind of stillness that excludes sound or action. It's a stillness that coexists with everything. You can be speaking, laughing, crying, or working, and yet underneath there's a stable center that never moves. It doesn't require effort to maintain. It's what remains when effort stops. You begin to see that what you once called growth was mostly the mind rearranging its furniture. The real transformation happens when the decorator walks out of the room. When consciousness observes without judgment, the illusion of control dissolves, and with it, the weight of identity. Life starts to flow on its own rhythm, spontaneous, unpredictable, yet perfectly coherent. You respond instead of react. You listen instead of prepare your reply. You notice instead of interpret. This shift isn't about withdrawing from the world. It's about meeting it without filters. The mind, for all its brilliance, was always a translator, constantly converting reality into meaning. Now, as the storyline fades, experience becomes direct again. Our sound isn't good or bad. It's just sound. A person isn't right or wrong. They're a mirror reflecting a state of consciousness. Even pain becomes less personal, more like a signal passing through awareness. And the beauty of this realization is subtle. You no longer need the story to validate your existence. You're not waiting for something to happen to prove that you are real. The simple act of being, breathing, noticing, existing, becomes complete in itself. You discover that consciousness is not inside the body. The body is inside consciousness. Time, memory, identity, they all unfold within this boundless field that you've always been. You might find yourself laughing at moments that once felt tragic, not out of disrespect, but because you see the perfection of the dance. You see that every turn, every mistake, every heartbreak was leading you here, to this clarity that has no opposite. It's not happiness in the usual sense. It's deeper, quieter. It's the peace of not needing anything to be different. Still, the mind will occasionally pull you back into its web. It will say, "You're losing interest in life. You're drifting away." But that's only because it can't understand peace without tension. It believes that movement is life and stillness is death. Yet what consciousness reveals is the opposite. Stillness is the ground of all movement. It's what allows every motion to arise and fade. Nothing is lost in it. Everything returns to it. From this space, even the idea of awakening becomes unnecessary. Who would awaken if the self that sought awakening was never real to begin with? What's left is awareness being aware, pure observation without an observer. It doesn't need to make sense to the intellect. In fact, it never will. The intellect is a servant of time, but awareness belongs to eternity. And as this understanding deepens, something remarkable happens. Gratitude arises not as an emotion, but as a natural expression of recognition. You look at the same world that once confused and frightened you, and now you see it as a reflection of your own being. Every person becomes a window into the same light. Every sound a reminder of the silence that holds it. Every moment a mirror showing you that nothing was ever separate. This is where the story truly dissolves, not by ending, but by being seen for what it always was. Consciousness playing hide and seek with itself. The dream continues, but now the dreamer is awake inside it. And if you felt even a trace of that clarity while listening, pause for a moment, let it settle. Then, as a small gesture of acknowledgement, tap the like button, not for approval, but as a way of saying, "I see it too." And write in the comments the words that mark this remembrance. The story is dissolving. Let it be a signal, a quiet ripple from one awareness to another, echoing through the vast field that was never divided in the first place. The noise doesn't end with an explosion. It fades like mist. One moment the mind is still spinning its web of stories. The next, the tension loosens, and everything grows strangely still. You don't step into silence. Silence reveals that you never left. It has been breathing through every sound, carrying every heartbeat hidden in plain sight. What felt like chaos was only its movement disguised as life. Silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence beneath all sound. It doesn't begin after the music stops. It's the space that allows the music to exist at all. You've heard it before, not with the ears, but with the whole being. It's there between two thoughts, between inhale and exhale, between one heartbeat and the next. The mind calls it nothing, but that nothing is the pulse of everything. Rest in that for a second. Notice how the body stills, not by control, but by recognition. You aren't holding the silence, it's holding you. The effort to listen fades, and what remains is listening itself. This is the dimension that doesn't belong to the game because it never participated in it. The board, the rules, the roles, all were echoes inside this still field. The strange part is that silence doesn't fight for attention. It doesn't need to, it waits. Every argument, every plan, every attempt to figure life out eventually collapses into it. Not as punishment, but as gravity, the return of waves to the sea. You start to feel that pull, the way everything naturally moves towards stillness once resistance ends. Even thought obeys it. You can watch it rise and dissolve, unable to find a place to stand. The mind resists at first. It calls this quiet emptiness, convinced it's losing itself. But the fear belongs to the noise, not to you. Silence doesn't erase identity. It reveals what existed before identity appeared. The me that fought, planned, regretted, and hoped was only a ripple on the surface of something boundless. The silence underneath was never touched by its storms. Listen closely. Beneath the hum of the world, something steady vibrates. Not sound, not energy, but awareness without motion. It doesn't change with mood, age, or circumstance. You've known it all your life but mistook it for background. It's what watched you grow, what witnessed every loss, what stayed when every story fell apart. This is not an idea. It's the direct texture of being itself. As this realization deepens, the sense of inside and outside begins to blur. The boundaries you thought were real, body, thought, world, dissolve into one continuous field. The sound of wind, the flicker of light, the rhythm of your breath, all inseparable. The silence isn't behind them, it is them, expressed as motion. What you used to call experience now feels like silence exploring itself through form. That's why peace feels so intimate yet so vast. It doesn't come from removing noise. It comes from recognizing that noise has always been silence in disguise. Conflict, emotion, thought, all different shapes of the same stillness. Once this is seen, judgment loses its edge. You stop trying to silence the mind because you see the mind as silence pretending to speak. The world softens. Colors seem deeper, air feels thicker, time moves slower, not because reality changed, but because you stopped resisting it. Presence becomes effortless. You no longer need to search for meaning in events. The meaning is the seeing itself. Silence isn't teaching you anything, it's unteaching everything you thought you knew. Even the sense of awakening begins to dissolve. You realize that the search for enlightenment was the last noise, the echo of the mind wanting credit for its own disappearance. The truth is quieter than that. It asks for nothing. It doesn't even ask to be understood. Understanding is movement. This is stillness. In that stillness, existence folds back into itself. The observer and the observed collapse into one awareness, seamless and transparent. The stories that once seemed monumental, childhood, success, loss, future, fade like dream fragments at dawn. What's left isn't emptiness, but absolute intimacy. Everything you see, hear, or touch feels impossibly close, as if the world has turned inside out and is now resting in your chest. The mind might try one last trick, to label this silence as an experience, to make it another memory to keep. But silence can't be held. The moment you try to grasp it, it slips through thought, reminding you that it never belonged to the one who wanted to own it. You can only be it. That's the secret the game was hiding all along. This is the space where nothing needs to happen. No victory, no loss, no progress. Just being. Complete, indivisible, infinite. The silence was never waiting to appear. It was waiting to be recognized. It doesn't need to be understood, only noticed. And once you notice it fully, you realize it has no edges, no center, no opposite. You open your eyes, and the same world greets you. But everything feels translucent. The noise continues, yet it no longer stirs the depths. You walk, speak, love, and work, but a vast stillness moves with you, through you, as you. The silence is not behind the world. It is the world seen without distortion. The game didn't end. It was never real enough to need an ending. The silence remains, before thought, beneath emotion, beyond time. It was here before the first move on the board, and it will be here after the last piece fades. And now you know. It was never hiding. It was you, all along, quietly waiting to be seen. You reached the end only to see there was never a race. The game you struggled to master was made of belief, and belief dissolves in awareness. The victory you sought was only the silence recognizing itself. Life still moves, but the tension to control it is gone. What remains is simplicity, breathing, seeing, being, untouched by gain or loss. The awakening isn't a triumph, it's the return to what was always whole. If you felt that stillness inside this reflection, write in the comments, "I was never playing." And if you want more journeys like this, subscribe and keep walking with me through the space beyond the game.